Minister, I welcome the deferral of the terrible attack on the flat rate system, but noting your confirmation to me earlier this week, you said that the approach will ensure that any changes that may be made to the flat rate expenses regime do not impact on any specific group earlier than the rest. Clearly an indication that there is more to follow and all of these changes should happen at the one time. Yesterday we heard from the Taoiseach suggesting that this may not happen at all, where he said that the measures will be politically proofed and no changes will happen before the 1st of January 2010, if at all. So can you confirm to us the current position in relation to this, because you have indicated to me on 2 previous occasions that the review is complete under a number of sections and that it is a deferral of a decision that has already been made. Yesterday the Taoiseach has suggested that this change may not happen at all.
I am advised by the Revenue that the effective date for implementation of the changes referred to by the Deputy is being deferred to the 1st of January 2020. The intention is that Revenue will have completed the comprehensive review of all flat rate expenses by this date, so this approach will ensure that changes to flat rate expenses regime do not impact on any specific group earlier than the rest. I also understand that the Revenue will be in contact with the relevant representative bodies in regard to this work. However, it is important to be clear that there has been no change to the general rules set out in legislation that says all employees are entitled to claim a deduction under Section 114 of the Taxes Act of 1997 in respect of an expense incurred wholly, exclusively and necessarily in the performance of the duties of their employment, to the extent to which expenses are not reimbursed by the employer. This means that all employees remain entitled to claim deductions for valid and specific expenses incurred. The Revenue are independent in their administration of the tax code. The flat rate expenses regime is an additional concessionary practice operated by the Revenue, where both specific commonality of expenditure exists across an employment category and the statutory requirement for the tax deduction that is set out is satisfied. The purpose of the regime is to simplify administration where the specific legislative criteria is met, to help both the taxpayer and the Revenue by making it easier for large groups of employees working in the same sector to avail of their entitlement to tax relief in respect of expenses incurred in the performance of their employment duty. I understand that earlier this year, Revenue commenced their review of flat rate expenses to ensure the expenses are still justified and appropriate to modern-day employments and work practices. This is given their historic nature and having regard to changes in employment circumstances, regulations and work practices across employments.
Minister, you can imply that nothing has changed, but we know the reality is very different. There's a reason why we have this system, and that is so that organised groups of workers can avail of their rights. That is why ICTU and Mandate are opposed to this, and I commend their activism in this regard. It is now been taken away from individual workers, where they would be allocated these as a right, as being part of a group of workers, where they will now individually have to hold receipts and claim individually, and that is just a bureaucratic nightmare for those claiming, but also for Revenue, who will have to process such claims and check such claims. Minister, you said that the Revenue are independent on the implementation of the tax code, and that is a clear statement of fact. But let me again quote you what the Taoiseach said, verbatim: "No changes will be implemented before the 1st of January 2020, if at all. I will make sure changes are politically proofed before they happen." So can you outline to this House what politically proofing do you intend, or your government or the Taoiseach intend to make in relation to this? And why is the Taoiseach now suggesting that these changes may not happen at all? Is it the case that the review has been completed in a number of sectors and the decision has been made, although that decision, the implementation date, has been deferred? Or is there now a question mark, as the Taoiseach has outlined, that there is a question whether this will happen at all? Can you also outline to the House what engagement you have had, or your officials have had, in relation to this measure with Revenue officials?
So to date, This has been a matter that was being implemented by the Revenue Commissioner, and on fuss of the concern that developed in relation to the matter across the early part of this week, they made the decision in relation to deferral. In relation to the proofing that you were referring to there, I think it is important that when work like this is underway, there's broader awareness of what is happening. And I welcome the fact now that the Revenue Commissioner will be contacting representative bodies in relation to this matter, so everybody is aware of what is underway. I mean, a point that does need to be looked at is because this is a tax relief, as the Deputy will know, one of the matters the Revenue will have to look at is that this is a relief that is therefore worth more to people who are on higher rates of income tax. And the Revenue Commissioner will be reviewing this matter across next year, and as I said, made the decision that changes, if any, will be deferred until the 1st of January of 2020.
Minister, the decision has already been made in relation to 5 categories of workers. Those most affected are those working in shops, and a decision has been made to end the flat rate expenses relief system for those workers, 75,000 workers. Can you confirm to the House whether that decision still stands or whether that decision is now subject to a review? Can you outline whether any of the other reviews have taken place outside of the 5 categories, and have they been decided upon by the Revenue at this point in time? And in relation to the Minister's or the Taoiseach's own assertion on the floor of this House yesterday that he personally will ensure that there's political proofing in relation to this, does that not suggest that this will be a political decision at the end of the day and not one solely in the hands of the Revenue? It is clearly the indication that he gave the House yesterday. And finally, can I ask you, Minister, to deal with this issue in a very transparent way, will you amend the Finance Bill as it is making its way through the Seanad to ensure that any changes to the flat rate expenses will require politically proofing by consent of the Houses of the Oireachtas?